So today I'm going to be going over how to cook the perfect steak. In previous speeches, I know I've talked about my experience in kitchens. I've been cooking since a very young age with my mother and my grandmother and family around me. And I'm coming up on 2 years of being a corporate trained cook at Red Lobster, being the youngest certified grill master in the facility. And so I feel like I know a lot about this topic, and I've even taught myself even more about this topic with this speech. But today I'm going to be going over, first off, the best cuts of meat, where you can find it, why you want to use these cuts of meat, and the differences between them. I'm also going to be going over what happens while you're cooking a steak and the chemistry behind the meat and the heat itself. Lastly, I'm going to be going over how to cook this steak in the best way, in my opinion, and hopefully that will be able to teach some people how to cook the perfect steak. So first off, like I said, different cuts of meat are going to make a different steak, really. The best place to find any cut of meat on any animal is where it's going to get the least amount of movement. This way the muscles are not too tight, they're very tender, they're very lean. And the most popular cuts of meat that are going to be coming from a cow are going to be your sirloins, your tenderloin fillets, or your filet mignon, and the T-bone steak. So, right off the bat, if we look at this diagram, your sirloin steak is going to be right above your tenderloin right here. This is going to be where your sirloin is. The sirloin is going to be a very cheap cut of meat. It's not going to be as tender as other cuts of meat out there, but it's going to be very flavorful. It's going to be easy to cook. You're going to have a little bit of fat, which is going to help that cook down and bring more flavor. But mostly you're going to want to marinate this or let it rest overnight with some salt or a sauce before you cook it, just to make it more tender. Tenderloin fillets, more commonly known as filet mignon, is what most people say is the best cut of meat because it's also the most expensive cut of meat. It's going to be coming right here from the tenderloin itself. So this is a very expensive cut of meat because it's got a very mild flavor. It's got a lot of marbling though, and marbling is the fat which goes throughout the meat, or the cut of the meat, but it's also a very tender cut because it has very little to no movement without the entire cow. Whereas if you're getting something from the shoulder, it's going to be very tough because it's moving, it's working that muscle a lot. Lastly is the T-bone steak, which is found right below the tenderloin at the short loin. It's going to have a tenderloin fillet on one side and then a T-bone, a strip steak on the other side, separated by a T-bone, which is where it gets its name. So of course this is going to give you the best of both worlds. It's going to have a very tender side with the fillet, and it's also going to have the very flavorful, very lean strip steak as well. Now there's marbling all throughout it, but the best way to get this, it's good for grilling and broiling. You're not going to really want to pan sear the steak because the bone in the middle makes it hard to cook. But it's also best for rare steaks, again, because the bone in the middle, it's going to make it difficult to cook, but it's also going to give an immense amount of flavor throughout the steak. But of course, we're going to need to know what happens, what gives this steak the flavor. And one of the biggest things that does that is the Maillard reaction. It is a very important, crucial step in preparing any kind of protein, because this is where you're going to get the most flavor. The Maillard reaction, it's a chemical reaction between amino acids and reduced sugars that gives it its flavor. It's basically caramelizing the outside of the protein, such as if you pour sugar straight into a pan and let it heat, that's going to create a very simple caramelize. And it's going to create a lot of flavor. This is why a roasted piece of chicken is going to taste better than a boiled piece of chicken. In that water, it's not getting the right amount of heat to be able to combine the amino acids and the sugars. It results in a strong umami flavor, which is one of your basic 5 flavors, and this is the savory one. It's kind of like if you just drank soy sauce or Worcestershire, you're going to get a big hit of that. But of course, you're not going to be getting this unless you prepare the steak in the right way. In my opinion, which is credited by highly renowned chefs such as Gordon Ramsay, I know Robert Irvine does this method as well, Alton Brown also prefers this method. and even many articles on Epicurious, which is a very widely renowned food website where you can find recipes and things. They highly suggest using this method as well. It just really brings out the flavor of the meat and is a really nice way to easily cook it. So what you're going to do is you're going to start off with your meat. You're going to want to have this meat fully thawed out at room temperature. You're going to want to season it with only salt and pepper and just let it rest while you start the other things. You're going to want to get a cast iron skillet ripping hot with olive oil to start, and this is going to create a very high intense heat to caramelize the steak with the Maillard reaction, like I mentioned. You're going to want to start with the best cut of meat you can find, though. Fillets, most people's opinion, and my own as well. And then you're going to want that cast iron to get ripping hot with a high smoke point oil, such as olive oil. After that, once you can know it's ripping hot, you're going to put the steak into the pan, and you're just going to sear it. This isn't the steak. This is just to get that nice outside that everybody loves. After that, for about 1 minute, then you're going to flip that steak and let the other side. And this is where you're going to add about 3 tablespoons of butter and any aromatics you want, like oregano, thyme, garlic cloves. These are going to be the best things for that. You're going to add it all to the pan, let that butter melt and get brown, as a lot of people like to call it. It's going to release all the flavors in the butter. Then you're going to baste your steak with that butter with a spoon. You're going to tilt your pan upwards and then let all the butter go to one side as you baste the steak. This is just going to get a lot of the butter flavor onto the steak. After that, you're going to put your steak into an oven that's heated up to 350 degrees up until it's just done to your personal range. You've got rare, which is 120 to 125, mid-rare, which is 126 to 134, medium, which is 135 to 144, mid-well, which is 145 to 154, and well done, which is anything above 155, which most people will tell you is wrong, but that's just how you do it. So overall, there's so many places that eat so much amount of beef. Overall, the U.S. Department of Agriculture actually says that there's a sharp rise in people consuming meat over the past few years, including in 2018, the average person consumed 222.2 pounds of meat overall. So steaks are going to be a very large part of that, and we might as well be eating them right. So I hope that I was able to tell you the best cuts, the best way to prepare, and what happens while you're doing that in the best way possible. And that is how I cook the perfect steak.